reading that was shared with us this morning is where we'll spend the bulk of our time as we study Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, and examine a truly outstanding, exceptional life in that of our brother and example, the great man Daniel. As we get started, I want you to think of most of you work in an environment where you've probably been subjected to an annual or periodic evaluation. Has anybody ever had one of those? An annual periodic evaluation. Now, in my world, I joke that I've not had a real job since I was 20, because I've been preaching all these years. But I have, through the years, I've taught some college courses and things, adjunct. And the only one of those that I've ever endured was back in Alabama. I taught philosophy. Well, just one day a week, one morning a week at the local community college. And they had an annual evaluation. And so the head of the department came in and he sat through your class one day and observed how it went with your students. And then they gave out a little survey to the students and all of this. And he called me in his office and we went through, and on about 4 or 5 different points, it had 5 different criteria. And in each of these, he would either notate that you were unsatisfactory in your work, or below average, or satisfactory, or above average, or exceptional. And each one had those 5 different categories. That's similar to what you've been subjected to in your work environment. And I looked at that and I went through, and it turned out fine for me. But I just imagined, what would it be like if in every area the middle box was checked? Satisfactory, 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 satisfactory. Well, that word brings with it a sense of being just good enough. I mean, at work, would you have felt satisfied with all satisfactories? You see, it's kind of interesting. Ironically, that word doesn't seem to mean what the word means. Isn't that strange? The word says that's satisfactory, but you don't feel satisfied, and your boss doesn't feel satisfied if that is your evaluation. Because the reality is none of us really want to be just satisfactory. Because the word is just good enough. That's what it is. How about this? Fathers, do you want to just be a satisfactory father? I hope not. Mamas, do you just want to be a satisfactory mother? Husbands, wives, do you want to be just a satisfactory? Is that all you want to be when it comes to being a husband or a wife? And as a believer, if God were to look at our lives and evaluate not just our morality and our goodness, but our heart and our intensity and our devotion and our love for Him, how would we feel if all down the chart God looked at my life and said, satisfactory? Satisfactory. You see, the reality of what it means to truly love the Lord, just like what it means to truly love our kids and truly love our spouse, is satisfactory is unsatisfactory. Right? We need more. What we want is exceptional. All the way down the line. And our theme for this year from Joshua of be strong and courageous. I've tried to think of other great Bible characters who exemplified those virtues of strength and courage. And I could think of so many, but none more appropriate than Daniel. Because as he faces so many challenges, he not only faces them with courage and with strength, he faces them with true excellence. Look at the text here. It says in verse 3, then Daniel distinguished himself above all the governors and the satraps because an excellent spirit was found in him. Now, this is written by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit in evaluation of who he is. And God says, here's what he is. Excellent, excellent, excellent. More than satisfactory. And so as we examine his life, we realize that excellence has some downsides. Did you know that? Did you know excellence has some downsides? Number one, excellent people have more relationship problems with other people. You know why that is? Because they're threatening. Not because they intend to be. But because excellence tends to shine a bright, bright light on satisfactory. Doesn't it? It tends to draw attention by way of comparison to unsatisfactory and to lacking. I mean, have you ever noticed that? Anybody play golf? Come on, guys. Who's picked up a set of golf clubs in this last year? What happens? Now, I played with Don Robinson, and when he and I are playing, we've got excellent and unsatisfactory, okay? That's how this works. But Don's had this experience. You played with guys who are really, really, really good, right? How's it make you feel? Yeah. How's it make you feel, though, right? I mean, it's challenging. Why is that? Because it shines a light on your play based upon how they play. Isn't that right? I mean, some of them are so gracious. I mean, when I was with Don, he complimented me. That was a good shot. And I thought, you've made better ones all day long. Thank you, Don, for patronizing. I mean, being nice to me. You know? But that's the way it is, isn't it? Isn't that the way it is? When you're around someone who just is so good and so exceptional and really, really, really shines in any area, what does that reflect upon any performance that is substandard to that performance? I'm just being honest, right? It shines a light on the satisfactory. Well, here's the thing. We can endure that when it comes to playing golf, right? Because I'm a whole lot better than Don Robinson at a lot of other things. You know? No, I'm kidding. Better looking, stuff like that. No. But, we go and you look at those type of things in our lives and we can shrug that off. But the truth is that if it's things in your life that matter, I mean, you realize in this story, Daniel, these satraps and these governors, they didn't have any reason to dislike Daniel. Daniel was a nice guy. Daniel was kind. Daniel was good. Daniel tried to make everything better for everyone, but they hated him. Why did they hate him? Why does the Bible say they hated him? Did they hate him because he was mean? No. Did they hate him because he was, trying to step on everybody else? No. Did they hate him because he only cared about his own success? No. Why did they hate him? Because his degree of excellence reflected negatively upon their degree of satisfactory. Isn't that right? So here's the thing that I want us to be very clear about. I've been struggling lately with the gospel of health and wealth. Has everybody ever heard of this before? The health and wealth gospel. The TV preachers are big on this. They'll be, if you just name it, you can claim it. They get this from taking scriptures out of context a lot of times. But basically the concept is, if you ask God, he's going to give it to you. If you believe strong enough, he's going to give it to you. If you give to the Lord, he's going to give back to you. and we look at that and we just get, it seems so distasteful and so unbiblical. The problem is, though, is that really is kind of what the Bible says. It really is. The Bible really does say if you give, I mean, we talked about this recently in regard to just the monetary type of giving, which is not even close to being the only kind of giving. But even in that regard, I mean, I found it to be true, and everybody in this room who's been generous has found it to be true. It's just true. The only people who doubt it are the people who struggled with doing it. When you're generous, the Lord will open up the windows of heaven. It's true. The Bible says it's true. Experience says it's true. You look and every great character of the Bible is blessed, immensely blessed, when they're faithful and when they put Him first. And so the problem, what is the problem? Why does it bother us so much, these health and wealth preachers? Because I know they pull some of it and they go to an extreme that isn't true and all this, but the basic concept, that's true. Here's the problem. They don't talk about the challenges that come along with the blessings. Isn't that right? They just make it seem like, you give your heart to God, you do well, you'll be blessed physically, you'll be blessed spiritually, you'll be blessed relationally, and then they stop the conversation. They don't go far enough to say, and that's all wonderful, and a whole bunch of people are going to hate you for it. Because that's true too. Right? Here's the thing. Their problem with their message is they don't go far enough and bring out the reality of every single one. I mean, Joseph had the problem, didn't he? Joseph was so exceptional, and even his own brothers hated him for it. We could look at the lives of David. Was exceptional. Who hated him? Who tried to kill him for years and years and years and hunted him all over the Middle East? Saul hated him for it. Daniel was exceptional. Everyone else hated him for it. Jesus, because the Pharisees were jealous, because his exceptionalness shone a light on their less than satisfactory lives. So the problem with that health and wealth gospel is not the root message. It's that it's not a complete message. And so one thing I think we need to understand is that to be strong and courageous, we have to know what we're facing. So I want to encourage you this morning as we look at this text to realize that God will bless us and we can be a great success in every way. We can reach this community with the gospel. We can continue the growth that Waterford has experienced in the past, and it can be exponentially compounded. We can meet every need and be a powerful influence for the Lord in this community. But there will be challenges along with the blessings. Because we're in a spiritual war. And when we start to win, the enemy and his forces will despise us for it. So the title of this morning's lesson is The Reasons the World Hates Men and Women of God. And here's the root reason. Because they are excellent. In 2 Timothy 3:12, it says, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. That's what it says. Not may, or it's a slim chance, or on odd occasion, will suffer persecution. In Matthew chapter 26, verses 59 through 61, we see in the life of Jesus this played out, where it says, In verse 59, the chief priests and the elders and the council sought false testimony against Jesus in order to put him to death. But they found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last, 2 false witnesses came forward, and they said, "Fellow man, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it up in 3 days." Now listen to what it says about Jesus. He says in the life of Jesus, they despised him, so they sought to found false witnesses, and they found none. They couldn't even find, now get this, he doesn't say witnesses. They couldn't even find false witnesses. Jesus was so tremendous in his character, in his exceptional nature, that they had to search and search and search for 2 people in the whole nation. Now we know they're willing to pay for it, right? Remember the whole instance with Judas? So even though they're forking out 30 pieces of silver, which is a great many denarii. A denarii is a day's wage. Just start doing the math. That's big money. They're willing to fork it over just for somebody to lie, and it takes them a long time, and they only are able to find 2 people that are even willing to lie about him. Because Jesus is exceptional. But here's the thing. They never stopped to pause. Well, we can't even find anybody to lie about him. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's good. Maybe he's holy. Maybe the problem is us and not him. They don't care. They do not care. He's a threat. He's a threat to them. Is he trying to take over the Sanhedrin? No. Is Jesus does he attack them? You know what's interesting about it? In all of those exchanges between the Pharisees and Jesus, who starts those exchanges? We talk about how Jesus is so hard on the Pharisees, but who begins those conversations every time? The Pharisees. Now, Jesus vests them in every single debate, but it's not because Jesus is searching them out to attack them. No. You see, they don't even reflect upon the fact that this is our problem, and the fact that we can't find witnesses. That's evidence of it, because it's a threat, and they're going to try to destroy that threat. And that is the same pattern all throughout the Bible. But it doesn't surprise us. That's true in every area of life. If you go to your job and you're the best employee they have, some of your coworkers will hate you for it. They will. But here's what I want to encourage you to do. Be the best employee they've ever had anyway. And if you are involved in an organization, a civic organization, and you're the most serving, kindest person they've ever had, some of your fellow, servants, they'll hate you for it. I want to encourage you, be the best anyway. Not because you just want to be the best, but because the Lord deserves servants. He deserves Christians. He deserves followers who give it their everything, who strive for God to say of them, as he said of Daniel, he is excellent in all that he does. And the reality, the consequence of it, is some people will see it, and you will be rewarded for it. That's the nature of life. But others will hate you for it. That's also the reality of the spiritual war. So in what ways was Daniel exceptional? What does he give us an example of? Well, first of all, in verse 2 of this text, it says, "And over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps may give an account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss." To aspire to that point, to that place in his work, Daniel was, First of all, exceptional. He strove for excellence in his work. Now, Daniel was a faithful man. He was a faithful Jew in a place that was not friendly towards Judaism. In fact, he had been carried to Babylon as a slave. You want to talk about upward mobility? You want to talk about the land of opportunity? You know, you might look at your life and say, well, I just feel like the world's holding me back. Let me tell you, no world has ever held anybody back worse than it held back the man Daniel. As he went to a place where he was carried literally in chains, where he was made to be a palace slave, where he was mistreated all along the way, and he rises to the point where he is one of the top 3 men in the entire world under the king Nebuchadnezzar. Well, now it's under Darius, since the Persians have taken over. So he rises, he aspires to this point. And the only way you get there, folks, is excellence. Excellence. Folks, when we go to work, we should be a people who give it our everything, who give it everything we have. Not because we have a great boss or we have a great job. In fact, you may not have a great boss and you may not have a great job, but you do have a great God, who, as it was so excellently explained to us this morning, who has given us so much. And we don't work for the man. We work for the man, right? We work because we're grateful to him. It's another way of expressing and giving back. So when you go to your office, or when you go to your factory, or when you go to your school, or wherever it is that you work, people who are truly invested in their faith are invested in excellence in their work. In Ephesians chapter 6, 5 through 8, Paul will say these words: "Servants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and sincerity of heart as to Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, not as servants of Christ, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart." He says, don't do well in your work because you're trying to please everybody else. That'll make you not be excellent. Do you know that? Because the only way you can please everybody else is to be mediocre, because that's not threatening. He says, you do it as unto God. Be the best that you can be. I read about years ago, a young boy walked into a drugstore when they had a corner drugstore everywhere, and he said, "Sir, may I use your telephone?" He went over and he put his nickel in the telephone and he dialed a number, and he said, "Can I speak to Dr. Anderson, please?" And he said, "Dr. Anderson, I was wondering if you needed to hire a boy to run errands and do things for you." "Oh, you already have a boy? Well, are you satisfied with his work?" "Oh, you are? Well, thank you, sir." And he hung up the phone. Then he was walking out. The druggist said, "Well, excuse me, young man." He says, "I could use somebody around here to do some work. Are you looking for a job? I'd be interested." He said, "Oh, no, sir, I'm fine." He said, but you just called to ask." He said, "No, sir, I have a job." "Well, you do?" "I work for Dr. Anderson." I just wanted to make sure that I'm doing a good job. You know what we call that? Excellence. Excellence. The second thing we see is in verse 3, it says, "Then Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was found in him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole kingdom." An excellent spirit. If you really want to distinguish yourself, if you really want to rise above, the most quickly observable form of excellence. Now, if you're excellent in your work, it will be noticed eventually. if you're excellent in the other things on this list that we're bringing out, it'll be noticed eventually. But but the thing that will be noticed most quickly is an excellent spirit, an excellent attitude. I have had the blessing and curse of living for 25 years with somebody who is blessed / cursed with a excellent attitude. And the reason I say blessing and a curse is it lifts me up when I'm in the doldrums, living with an optimist. But it's a curse because sometimes you just don't want to get out of the doldrums, and it's just annoying, that perpetual happiness. But I'll tell you one thing. Everywhere that lady has been and worked, it's like employee of the year. I'm like, I don't think you work all that much. You can't even spell. You can tell her I said that. But she gets employee of the year and things. And I'll tell you why. She still gets phone calls from Arkansas every day. I'm not going to brag on her in the second service because she'll be sitting there. Because that she has an excellent spirit. You know people like that in your life? They're just excellent. They're happy because they choose to be. People aren't happy all the time because their life is great. You do realize that, right? People that are happy all the time are happy because they choose it. They choose that spirit, that attitude. People who are optimistic aren't optimistic because they're born that way. They're optimistic because they choose it. They choose an exceptional attitude. And I'll tell you, in the world, you know how rare that is? How just incredible it is to find people who choose the right attitude. Philippians chapter 2:5 says your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. You want a model for attitude, find and look up his and try to walk in his steps. A positive mental attitude is so very, very, very important. You probably heard this story, but it never gets old to me. Of the little boy who walked out with his glove and his bat and his ball, telling himself, I am the greatest that ever lived. No one's ever been a slugger like me. And then he took the ball in one hand, the bat in the other, and he imagined the crowd all around him. And he even made the sounds. Just like he's in Tiger Stadium, And he says, I am the greatest. And he throws it up. And he swings and he misses. Strike one. He shrugs it off. I'm the greatest hitter that ever lived. And he imagines the crowd. He throws the ball up, swings, and not even close. Strike two. As he picks up the ball from the ground, he could be tempted to be, discouraged, but no, he just thinks about the fact that, there's no greater glory than when defeat is right there and the greatest who ever lived on his third pitch. So here in the crowd in his mind, he throws the ball up. As it comes down, he swings with all of his might, and he misses. He laughs out loud, picks up the ball and says, I knew it. I'm the greatest pitcher who ever lived. That's what you call a positive spirit. An exceptional attitude. Number 3, in verse 4, it says, so the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no fault because there was faithfulness, not any error found in him. He had excellence in his loyalty to God. But you understand, not just excellence in his loyalty to God, excellence in his loyalty to King Darius. Because had they been able to find, like we live in the world of ugly politics, right? You go back and they'll find some interview or something that happened years ago or something somebody said out of place or whatever. That's why I'm never running for office, because all these sermons are on tape, right? And somebody will dig them up and find something that the guy said. I mean, that's the way it is, right? Here, you don't think they were trying to dig it up? You don't think they were trying to find one instance where he was complaining about his boss, about King Darius? You think Darius ever made decisions he didn't like? You think Darius ever did selfish things that were inconsiderate to Daniel? Did Daniel ever complain about his boss? No. You know why? If he had, these guys would have found it. Here's the thing. I don't think they ever found a moment when Daniel complained about them. They couldn't find anything, because he was exceptional in his relationships with others and exceptional in his loyalty, in his character. And what a time. So I'm going to throw in the last one because it's the most important. And this is found in verse 5. Then these men said, "We shall not find any charge against this Daniel, unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God." What a statement of his character. That his enemies know the only negative thing they'll be able to ever find is if they concoct one based upon his faith. Because even his enemies know he's going to be loyal, he's going to be true, he's going to be excellent. And the only way he'll break the law is if we put the law in odds with his faith. Peter said that. He said, "When men speak evil of you, let it not be for anything you have done." See, men are going to speak evil of us. But just as they had to find a reason with Jesus, they had to find a reason with Daniel, because this man was excellent in his service to God. God was first in his life, foremost and absolute. So as we learn from each of these, as we examine what it means, the reality is that when we're excellent, there will be challenges. There will be people who stand in our way. There will be people who hate us for it. That's why the health and wealth gospel is not true, because they just don't go far enough. They don't tell you the whole story. The rest of the story, as Harvey would say. And that is, yes, you'll be blessed. Yes, you'll be successful. All those things will be true. And yes, you will be hated. Because mediocre people are not threatening. Excellent people are. But here's the thing. When they threaten and they challenge, they did Daniel. But at the end of the day, who came out on top? Daniel. Because here's the thing. When you're striving for excellence, all that challenges are opportunities that make you stronger. Years ago, the northeastern cod industry in New England, which is one of their major fishing exports, they were faced with a challenge because the fish is exceptional. But as they would ship it to the West Coast, they had to freeze it at first, and they felt that it lost some of its flavor. So then they decided, well, we're going to ship it live. So they shipped the fish live in big tanks, but the fish just kind of lazed around in those tanks, and they got there and the texture got mushy, and they just trying to be exceptional in their product. They didn't think that would work. Finally, they came up with a great solution. They would ship them live in those big tanks, and they'd put in the natural enemy predator of the codfish, which is the oceanic catfish. And so for the 3,000-mile truck from the East Coast to the West Coast, that whole 3,000 miles, those catfish were chasing those cod all around the tanker the whole time. You know what ended up happening? They got the fish to the West Coast. Its flavor was exceptional. Its texture was exceptional. Because the challenge kept them strong and active. Here's the thing about being exceptional and people challenging you because of it. It's just, if you don't give up, makes you more exceptional. Right? This morning, as we look to be strong and courageous this year, I ask you this. If God were to evaluate your life, which box would he check? Exceptional. Satisfactory. If it's the second, let's make a change. Let us help you. Come right now as we stand and as we sing.